Hi everyone. So in this video, I'll be going through the major assignment instructions and also discussing an example throughout so you can gain an understanding of how to successfully complete this assignment. The assignment is essentially a literature review. So you're going to pick a topic, find articles that relate back to this topic, summarize these articles, and then make conclusions on the findings. The purpose of this assignment is to get you familiar with scholarly research and also to increase your ability in summarizing and integrating this information. So this assignment will be out of 50 points and it's worth 20% of your final grade. The assignment should be submitted on Blackboard. There's a submission portal under the Resources tab in the major assignment folder that's already up. If you submit the assignment late, you will lose 10% per day, and after 5 days, so that would be on November 13th, submissions will no longer be accepted. Your assignment file should either be a Word document, so a .doc or .docx, or in a PDF file, as these are the only file types that Blackboard can accept. So if you have a MacBook, or you use an Apple device, please do not submit a Pages document. Blackboard cannot read the Pages document, so just make sure that you convert your Pages document into a PDF or into a Word document. The assignment should be a minimum of 6 pages and a maximum of 8 pages, and this is not including the title page or reference page. And it should follow APA 7th edition, so it should be double-spaced with 12-point font. And you do not need to include an abstract or table of contents. So scrolling down, there is a big box discussing plagiarism in the assignment instructions. Plagiarism will be taken very seriously for this assignment. You need to have both in-text citations and a reference page for this assignment. If you're missing one or both of those things, this will be considered plagiarism and you will lose significant marks or even possibly receive a 0 on the entire assignment. So like I said before, this will be taken very seriously. Make sure you have both in-text citations and a reference page. You should also not be copying sentences or paragraphs from your articles. You should not need to direct quote any of the information from your sources, so you should be able to paraphrase all of the information in your paper, which paraphrasing means putting that information into your own words. So scrolling down again, this paper will consist of 7 total paragraphs, an introduction paragraph, 5 body paragraphs that are coming from your 5 sources, so 1 for each source, and a conclusion paragraph. So when you start the assignment, the first thing that you're going to do is come up with a topic. For your topic, you're going to want to look at 2 or more variables, and you must choose at least one of your variables from this list here. So for example, you could choose to look at long-term memory and academic performance as your 2 variables. So taking long-term memory from this list here. You can also choose to just compare 2 of the topics from this list. So for example, you could look at how attraction and love influences your dreams. So looking at chapter 11, attraction and love, and going back to chapter 5 in dreams. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to go through these instructions with my own example. So I'm going to relate one of these topics back to my own research. I'm interested in risky and aggressive behavior, and for my master's thesis, I looked at how personality and self-esteem predict aggressive driving behavior. So for my example for this assignment, I would probably look at motivation, so from chapter 11. So I would want to know if motivation influences aggressive driving. So my research question for this assignment could be, is aggressive driving influenced by our motivations? So for the introductory paragraph, you're going to start out with an introduction statement. So for my paper, I would probably start by mentioning how aggressive driving behaviors are prevalent and that they contribute to many vehicle accidents per year. Then you're going to want to define your variables. So in my example, I would define motivation from the textbook, and then I would define aggressive driving, likely from one of the sources that I found. And lastly, you'll want to mention your research question and set up the paper to begin the literature review. So in the introductory paragraph, we want you to use the textbook. So make sure you are citing the textbook when you're defining at least one of your variables. This is why we want you to choose from that list of topics within the textbook, as we actually want you to use the textbook for this paper. To cite Revel, since it's technically an online book, it's not a physical book, you can just cite it as if it were a physical textbook. The information for this citation can be found at the very end of the Revel book online, and you would just use the most recent copyright year for the year in the citation, which in this case, the most recent copyright year is 2022. So next, you'll write the 5 body paragraphs, which will stem from the 5 scholarly journal articles that you find. Scholarly journal articles can be found from multiple platforms, including Google Scholar, the Ledi library resource, which is called Omni, and other websites such as PSYC. I will leave links to these websites in the video description below. You'll want to make sure that when you're using these sites, you are signed into your UWindsor account on Google, or you're signed in when you're using the other platforms such as Omni or PSYC, as that will give you access to many more articles. If you start your search and you're not really finding many articles, it could be because you're not signed in with your UWindsor account. You also want to make sure that these articles that you're using are not meta-analyses or review articles. Meta-analyses and review articles are articles that look at multiple different studies and then summarize these findings, which is essentially what you're doing for this paper. So meta-analyses and review articles are not allowed for this assignment, and if you use one, you will receive a 0 on that paragraph. Usually, it's easy to tell if a paper is a meta-analysis or review, as they will have it right in the title of the paper. So for example, the title might say, Motivations Behind Aggressive Driving, a review paper. Or they might start out with saying, Meta-analysis of long-term memory and academic performance, something like that. Also, meta-analyses and reviews normally do not include a methods section. So if you do not see a methods section, or alternatively, the methods section of an article discusses how the author searched for and included other scholarly sources, then this is more than likely a meta-analysis or review. Additionally, we don't want you using master's theses or PhD dissertations, as these papers are not technically peer-reviewed. These papers are also easily detected, as the title of the paper will often include the word thesis or dissertation. And master's theses and dissertations are also usually very long, like over 100 pages long. So I'd imagine most people won't want to use these articles anyway. If you find an article and you're unsure whether you can use it or not, feel free to reach out to your assigned GA and ask them if the article can be used. I'm going to interrupt going over the assignment instructions, as I just wanted to give a quick example on how to find scholarly research articles. So I'm on the Ledi library resource, which is called Omni, and you can find this by typing in Ledi library Omni into Google. And as I mentioned earlier, I've also linked this website below in the description box. So first thing you want to do is make sure that you are signed into your UWindsor account on Omni. I'm already signed in, as you can see my name here in the corner. Next, I would start by looking up my research topic. So from my example, I would search for something like motivations behind aggressive driving. And as you can see here, scholarly articles will pop up. There's some books here as well. But this first one right here, you can see it says article, and it also has peer reviewed right here. So that's how you know you're going to be looking at a scholarly resource. And you can click on this article and gain access to it right here where it says view online. So back to the assignment instructions. For the body paragraphs, you will have one paragraph per source, so 5 body paragraphs total. There are 3 components that the GAs will be looking for when they're marking the body paragraphs. The first is the purpose and the methods of the study. So from my example that I've been discussing, I went ahead and found an article that fits with my research question. So I'll bring it up here. So the article that I found is titled Motives for and Attitudes About Driving-Related Anger and Aggressive Driving. So for my paragraph corresponding to this article, I would probably start off by introducing the article and discussing its purpose. So I went ahead and kind of created a sample paragraph. So I started it out with, in this study conducted by Jovanovic et al. 2011, the relationships between motivation, attitudes, and aggressive driving were examined. The purpose of the study was to investigate whether our motives affect our aggressive driving behavior. A questionnaire was distributed to 137 Serbian men and 123 Serbian women with an average age of 32.5 years. The questionnaire consisted of 4 measures that assessed driving anger, aggressive driving, motivation, and attitudes towards traffic. The questionnaire also collected socio-demographic information, such as how long the participants had held a driver's license, and also how many kilometers they drive in 1 year. So the next component that the GAs will be looking for is the study results. So we don't want to see actual statistics from the article. We want you to focus on interpreting the overall meaning from the results. So for my example, I would probably continue my paragraph with something like, the results of the study showed that 40% of the variance in aggressive driving can be explained by motives, attitudes, and driving anger. More specifically, the results of this study showed that total driving anger, attitudes towards drinking and driving, and the motives of impressing others, and haste or urgency all predicted aggressive driving. So therefore, these findings suggest that certain motivations, i.e. impressing others and haste, play an important role in whether an individual displays aggressive driving behaviors. So lastly, we want you to discuss how the findings of this article inform your research question. So I would conclude my paragraph with a quick sentence talking about how this article relates back to my research question. So for example, the findings of this study inform the research question as they suggest that our level of driving aggression is determined in part by our underlying motivations. The last part of this paper is the summary or conclusion paragraph. This paragraph will also be marked on 3 components. So the conclusion paragraph should start out by summarizing your 5 sources and discussing what these sources taught you about your research question. The second component is to identify any inconsistencies or gaps within the sources you've summarized. You should mention whether or not the findings of these articles were consistent. So for example, whether they all found that motivations impacted our driving aggression, or if they weren't consistent. So some studies found a link between motivation and driving aggression, while some didn't. Other gaps in the research could be the way in which the studies were conducted. So, for example, if all of your studies used a questionnaire as opposed to other techniques, such as an interview, or even with the samples of your study. So, for example, all of your studies may have looked at adult women as opposed to looking at men or children. So, lastly, for your conclusion paragraph, you're going to mention some future directions for this research topic. So, these can come directly from the gaps that you've just identified. So, for example, you could state that the sources you found only looked at women. So, future research in this area could look at men and how their motivations for aggressive driving could be different from women. So, for my example, my conclusion paragraph would sound something like this. I've just went ahead and created a fake conclusion paragraph which contains some of the knowledge that I know on this topic. So, in conclusion, the 5 sources examined in this paper showed that aggressive driving behavior is influenced by our motivations. The specific motivations that predict aggressive driving are impressing others, haste or urgency, vengeance, and thrill seeking. All of the sources showed significant results in that motivations predict aggressive driving to some extent. The literature also showed other important predictors of aggressive driving, such as driving anger and our attitudes towards driving. Although the literature examined used samples of participants consisting of both men and women, the sources all investigated driving aggression and motivations using self-report questionnaires. Research using self-report questionnaires may not always be accurate, as individuals may lie or exaggerate their behavior. Future research should investigate the relationship between our motivations and driving aggression using other methods such as a driving simulator. Additionally, future research should also focus on comparing different age groups to one another. So, for example, beginner drivers to older populations. So I'm interrupting the assignment instructions again just to show a quick example of how the paper should look when you're finished. So I've used the paragraphs that I've come up with throughout my example to fill out this paper. So first you're going to have the title page. This is an APA format complete with a title, your name, and the date. Next, you move on to the first page where you'll have the title again, followed by your introduction paragraph. And following that, you'll have the 5 body paragraphs. I've just went ahead and copied and pasted my one body paragraph that I came up with 5 times. And at the very end, you'll have the conclusion paragraph. And at the end of the document, you'll see the reference page. You'll also note that my example here did not quite reach the page minimum for this example, so you'll have to add more information to your paragraphs for this assignment, but this is just so you get an example of how the final paper will look altogether. I'll have this paper posted on Blackboard underneath my video for you guys to look at. So the last component for this major assignment is the APA format. Your paper should be in APA format, the 7th edition, and this will be marked out of 11 points. This is quite a big chunk of the paper, and in my experience of marking this paper, this is where many students lose the majority of their marks. There are tons of resources on Blackboard under the APA folder in the Resources tab. Take advantage of these resources and also the Letty Library Workshop, which will take place on October 20th. If you're unsure how to cite something or you want to double check that your citations are correct, feel free to reach out to your GA. Everyone is assigned a GA based on their last name, and this is the person who will be marking your assignment. I have the GA list here again to show you all, but this can also be found on the syllabus. So, for example, if your last name starts with AB, your GA would be Meredith. As I briefly mentioned earlier, there will be a page limit to this assignment, 6 pages minimum and 8 pages maximum. Any pages under or over this limit will result in a 1-point deduction overall. You will also be deducted 1 point overall for missing one of the required sources. So you need to cite the textbook and at least 5 scholarly articles. You can cite more than this, but you have to have at least these 6 citations. So that concludes this video on the major assignment. I hope you found it helpful and it will help you complete the assignment. If you have any specific questions about the paper, so for example, if you're wondering about a topic or a research question, or you want to know if you can use a specific article, please feel free to reach out to your assigned GA. If you have more general questions about the paper, you can feel free to email myself. So that's KOSTC, KOSTC at uwindsor.ca, or the course email, which is susie1150 at uwindsor.ca. And both of these emails will be in the description box as well. Thanks for watching.